I got the chords if y'all got the vocals.
Sure, hit me. Ground control to Major Tom.
Welcome to the Corridor Cast today. We got a cool thing to talk about because it's Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, why aren't you playing the Star Wars theme, Peter?
Oh, I used to know it, dude.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Corridor Cast, and today we're going to be talking about deepfakes and The Mandalorian. More specifically, spoiler alert for, Mandalorian Season 2. We're going to be talking a lot about Luke Skywalker. If you are a fan of the podcast and tune in regularly, hey, guess what? You get a sneak peek at the content coming out this weekend.
Oh, boy.
However, if you are coming from the whole weekend of Luke Skywalker stuff, welcome to the Corridor Cast. We like to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do about today.
Yeah, I feel like we might have some new listeners in this one because we mentioned that we have a podcast and a VFX artist react video.
Some new croutons.
Some new croutons.
The
That's right.
truest of croutons.
The truest of croutons. Croutons, Crewtons.
So one of the limiting things of VFX Artists React is that we cover like anywhere between 3 and 6 different movies or clips, really, scenes. And so we don't, and the videos are usually around 15 minutes or so. So we usually don't have that much time to really dive into the details and the nitty gritty of how they work. But in this episode, we got an hour to talk about stuff. So
Oh, boy.
I guess
we usually film for 3 hours too for VFX artists.
I
React.
know, right? It is like we film for 3 hours to get that 15 minutes of gold.
Yeah.
That's so much editing. Oh, my
It
goodness.
is. I mean, it's the hardest part of the whole show is just editing.
Yeah. Takes a whole week.
The one thing that always gets me is somebody will leave a comment like they didn't mention that one thing, and it's like, oh, we did mention that one thing.
I know, I get that too. It's like I can't believe you guys didn't talk about this thing. I was like, I spent 10 minutes talking about it, but then Dean's like, nah, not interesting, and cuts the whole thing. I'm like, dang it, Dean!
You know what? You can't argue with the editing.
I know they have a good eye and ear for when is dragging, what's entertaining, what's actually pushing some sort of story. But
or when there's a dragon in the shot.
Yes. So Star Wars, am I right?
Star Wars.
Dude.
So yeah, Mandalorian
right.
season 2.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's not
I
bad.
liked it a
Kind of
lot.
wacky
There
at
are a
times.
couple episodes that were, one episode in particular that I didn't like at all, but several of the episodes I thought were literal filming masterpieces. The Ahsoka episode was oh my god.
Wait, which one was that?
Episode 5, 4?
Was it the ice cave one?
No, the one with the other Jedi with the 2 white lightsabers.
Oh, yeah, that one was sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but every
Were you being
cinematic...
sarcastic?
What?
Were you being
No, it was great. But okay, every freaking cinematic universe has created some metal, type of metal that's indestructible. You got vibranium, you got unobtainium, you got what's the Mandalorian one?
Beskar.
Mandalorianium.
Mandalorianium. It's this new trope, and I'm tired of it.
Etium.
Yeah.
Starwanium.
Star Wars.
All right,
Starwanium.
I'm done.
So episode 8, I think, of The Mandalorian, the final episode of the season. All the heroes are down on their luck. They're begging for food on the corners as a bunch of killer robots, which are the peak technology in Star Wars at the time,
Bionicles.
robots, coming to kill them and take their jobs.
Yes.
I'm paraphrasing the show. And then, of course, Luke Skywalker comes flying in on his X-Wing to save the day. And honestly, I thought that whole sequence where he was just laying waste to all of them, I thought that was pretty cool.
I was so excited.
I thought it was good.
I liked it better than the Vader scene from Rogue One.
Really? I like that one much better.
That Vader scene is way better.
It had a lot more intense, intensity.
It had more pizzazz.
I think.
But it was so short, it was over in literally 28 seconds.
I mean, it's an emotional moment though. Seeing Luke Skywalker come back. I don't care. I'm a jaded Star Wars fan at this point. Most people are, I feel like. But Luke Skywalker got me. It's a big part of my childhood, and it's a big part of why I'm even here in this room. Recording this podcast, or why everybody's even listening to me is it's because of those movies.
Wow.
Most baby's first VFX shot.
Oh, lightsabers.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every day for 6 weeks did lightsabers in Photoshop.
Goodness.
Frame by
for
frame.
that
Frame
movie you
by
guys
frame.
did. Wow.
Yes.
Dude, that's the same as me. I don't use Photoshop. I just use After Effects.
Dude,
I'm gonna
same.
use this video editing program to edit my photos.
There are a surprising amount of VFX artists who use After Effects to edit photos.
It's a real thing. I've since
Yeah.
learned I'm not alone.
Oh yeah.
So
So Luke Skywalker shows up. He takes his hood off because he had hit his face through the whole action scene.
Mhm.
And when his hood came off, I was like, damn, that looks pretty good.
I thought the same thing. I was like, because I actually kind of knew going into it because everyone messaged me like, you got to react to Luke Skywalker from The Mandalorian. I'm like, what? It's Friday morning. The episode came out hours ago. These are the people that literally waited until midnight Thursday night to watch the episode and immediately spoil it for me online. I was like,
dude, that's
whatever.
the curse you have as a reacting VFX artist.
I know. And it wasn't that big of a deal, but the point is that I knew to expect Luke at the end of this. I knew that was Luke the moment like his X-Wing showed up. So I was like, okay, I was ready to judge how he looked. And my first reaction was, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Not bad.
At first glance, it looks pretty damn good.
Yeah, because he's not doing anything. The moment it gets a little closer and he starts actually like performing at all, that was when I was like, oh, okay.
That's why it looks good.
Yeah, like specifically when he talks, he's got a very stiff lip.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that first shot when he takes the thing off his hood off his head, I was like, okay, not bad.
Like they did a good job like aging him up a little bit and giving him a slightly new look that stays true to him. And then like it had the grit and the detail and I guess what makes it look human. When it wasn't moving, it looked really good. You could pause
the lighting and the skin tone and the texture were spot on. It was just the animation.
Yeah. And it should be worth we should mention this. So the hardest thing to do in CG, well, I mean, the hardest thing to do is to rotoscope a tree that's out of focus in front of your actor. Or a bush.
Anyone who's not an effects artist will have no idea what that means, but it is the absolute truth.
Oh my God, 3D conversion artists. Dude, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Those poor Indian children.
Oh boy.
All right. Second hardest thing, / the actual hardest thing in CG, is to make a digital human being. Well, you can make a digital human being. The hard part is making it look real. Like we've been doing that. Like that is the holy grail of visual effects. The closest we've gotten is Gemini Man. I mean, once again, 60%, 70% of the movie, it doesn't look real. Well, maybe 50%. But there's parts that do look flawless. And they actually have shots where both dudes, like the old and young Will Smith, were both 100% CG.
What?
And I didn't realize it until after I watched it.
Why?
I don't know why. I guess Ang Lee shot the whole in in like true stereoscopic 120 frames per second. And then they're like, oh, we can totally tell the actors aren't punching each other because we can see depth in our shots. So you can't stack punches. And we have such high frame rates that you can tell that the reactions don't line up. So they're just like, I guess we'll do the whole thing in CG.
That's ridiculous.
That's so bad.
I would argue that another like perfect CG human is in Logan when the Wolverine comes down the stairs. That's my go-to one, it's just like, I was blown away.
But
I
that's
thought
not
it was
much
like
different than Agent Smith from the Matrix series. Like, it's just the CG head on a dude.
It is. It is.
Yeah, it wasn't emoting or anything.
As far as the technology, it's the same. Same thing with, what's her face from Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
They are still computer-generated heads, necks, skin rendering, hair rendering, eye rendering, all that stuff is generated with intention behind it and animated. And yeah, I honestly, that was literally the thesis of my VFX. What was the thing? A TED Talk. Yeah, my TED Talk that I did, the TEDx talk at UPenn was literally about how like this stuff isn't just a matter of pressing a button. It takes a lot of care, and specifically, the hardest thing to do is a human face and make it realistic because you can get it to 99.9% good. And it's still not enough.
Yeah,
that's the whole point. It has to be 100%.
Yeah,
because we've spent millions of years evolving by recognizing each other's faces. Anything that's off is immediately like, I can tell.
And it's the whole 80-20 rule too. It takes 20% of your time to get 80% of the way there. It takes 80% of your time to get the rest of the 20%.
So sad.
Yeah.
Or in this case, it's the 0.1% of the work takes 99.9% of the time.
Yeah. So the big thing though is that these humans that have looked good, the one in Logan, the one in Blade Runner, they're not performing. They're very like they're basically wax models at that point, you know.
Although I went back and watched some of the Weapon X, I think was his name in Logan, and he's mostly obscured by action. So moving camera, motion blur. There are a few times when he is like pinned down and he's like snarling, he's like this. And it looks very good. Yeah. But we always only remember that one shot where he's coming down the stairs because that was the one they put all of their time and resources in. That was the money shot. That was like, all right, you gotta have one shot that looks good. This is the one.
Yeah. So
that's a great shot.
I mean, what makes human heads so hard to do in CGI, outside the fact that we are biologically wired to identify a single thing being wrong with them, is that you have a lot of crazy physics simulations going on the human head. Well, one, you have thousands and thousands of hairs over the whole thing, which are all slightly translucent. So already you're dealing with crazy physics of hairs and crazy physics of light. You're also dealing with rigid body dynamics, aka your skeleton, and then you have soft body dynamics on top of that, which is basically all your flesh and your skin. And it's different densities of soft bodies, and technically even fluid dynamics, because there's water in your eyes and in your mouth. So the whole thing gets really complicated, because even like if you're watching this podcast with video, like on the YouTube channel, when I talk, my head moves. It's moving because my jaw moves. It moves because my chest moves. It moves because the hands move. Like, it's all attached. Like, you can spend all your time animating a head, but if you haven't even thought about the hands, well, then what's the head motion going to be based on? Like, my hands move my head. My feet move my hands. Like, my whole body's connected. So you're sitting there, like, as an artist who specializes in face animations, and it's like, well, but are you getting your physics right for your hand animations? Do your ears wiggle at the appropriate amount for the soft body dynamics? It's like, I don't know. You know?
Well, like, you know, for animation of animals and whatnot, we've gotten really good over the last, 20 years doing that. I think mostly pioneered by Weta and whatnot. I think actually Andrew Kramer talked about this in the recent episode about that. And it's like, it all starts with like animating the bones, skeleton.
Like the literal bones, not just like a digital representation, like actual physically modeled bones.
Everyone in the audience probably took that literally, except for you.
Okay,
You're like, I'm used to working with digital skeletons, like not an actual like spooky bones skeleton.
Spooky bones.
Really, real quick, if you think about it, all animators are just digital taxidermists.
Yeah. I mean,
I gotta go.
But okay, so on top of those bones, though, you can't just like download a 3D model and just animate it and expect it to actually look like that realistic of like a biological being. You have to actually, first off, model the placement and simulate how those of all the muscles on a body, and then simulate how those muscles actually expand when they contract, because it's got a certain amount of mass. It doesn't get shorter, it contracts. And that means as it gets shorter, it actually gets wider. And so then you have to make sure you got all your muscles across the chest, the back, the neck, in the case of a face, the dozens of muscles or hundreds, I don't know how many muscles are in your face, but a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so once you simulate all of that, then you put a giant cloth over all of it, and that's where your skin comes in, because the skin isn't just like moving up and down, it's actually sliding across that muscle.
And it's
that's
attached
what you're
to certain
seeing.
points too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you basically have to have an entirely anatomically correct 3D model inside your little render engine in order for it to look real.
And then you got to make sure that your skin shaders are good. You got to make sure that you got the right proper amount of like subsurface scattering as the light hits the skin and goes through it and all that stuff. And guess what? We already can do all that just fine. Like, not we, I mean like the industry as a whole. Like ILM, Weta, Lola, like all these companies can already do that. And yet it's still not at 100%. So what is missing?
Well, also, I mean, it's crazy to think that through all those technical things you described, you still have to match the likeness of somebody also.
Yeah, no kidding,
Like
right?
starting with their skull. Like, what does their skull look like? Because that's going to influence where the muscles go. Like, I mean, I think what we're really just building up to here is we're trying to explain how hard and kind of why it's hard, how hard it is and why it's hard to build a digital human being.
Yeah.
So that's actually led to a lot of different approaches. For example, if you look at the Matrix Revolutions and the Matrix Reloaded, so they have all these Agent Smith clones. And the situation you're dealing with there is that you have to make a bunch of digital heads, but you don't have to invent a head from nothing. Hugo Weaving exists with his hair and makeup and sunglasses, his cool sunglasses, and his tuxedo right there, and you can scan him and you can plop him off to the side. I guess it's not a tuxedo. It's a suit. All right. All those FBI men in their tuxedos running around.
Looks so suave.
That's the CIA, man. The spies get to wear the tuxedos.
Yeah.
So in that case, what they did is they basically filmed him with multiple cameras, and he did the like emotions, and they basically just did photogrammetry. They rebuilt each pose, each frame of each pose in 3D using multiple angles that were covering at the same time, and they just stuck those 3D models on top. So all the wrinkles, all the dynamics, all the animation, all the likeness, even the texture. That's all captured from Hugo Weaving himself. You're basically just getting 3D scans and then plopping the 3D
basically
scan.
like a 3D photograph.
Yep, exactly.
Which is insane to capture all that data, because us doing like one photo scan takes about an hour to process all of that data. And so to do like 24 frames per second times how many seconds would just be like an insane amount of data
But
to
are
handle.
they actually doing that in a real time thing sort of thing, or are they just?
Well, it's not real time. No.
Well, I meant like, let me rephrase. You're suggesting that they're actually capturing a frame every second from all those cameras. I thought you were going to say that they just got like destination poses.
No,
for
it was a
instance.
full motion performance.
Full motion
24
performance.
frames per second.
Okay, yeah, I mean
Wild.
that's pretty crazy. And
40
also, that was
terabytes per
18
shot.
years ago.
Yeah, 40 terabytes per shot.
40 terabytes per shot.
18 years ago.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, so that's one way to do it.
That's one way to do it. The nice thing is that your 3D model looks perfect. The downside is that you are stuck having to just simply replicate something you already have.
Yeah,
Which is why it works so well. The other way to do it is kind of a newer way that it's a little complicated, and I'm not going to explain it perfectly because I don't have my head fully wrapped around it, but basically it's how ILM does a lot of their stuff these days.
Are you talking like the Grand Moff Tarkin and Princess Leia shots from Rogue One?
A little bit, and then also the Irishman.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So what they end up doing is they, because in that case, you are dealing with the 3D model of something that doesn't exist. I mean, I guess back in the day, young Robert De Niro existed, but young Robert De Niro does not exist right now. So
Young Robert De Niro is dead.
And to be fair, young Robert De Niro looks like 40-year-old Robert De Niro. So there's a certain point where they just have to, they can stop and they're good enough. But in this case, so they make the 3D model, they get it looking as close as they can, and then they basically sculpt it into poses. And they're looking at reference of Robert De Niro, and you still have all this reference, which is great, but you're basically moving into different poses. And then you have an AI-based pose estimator that will basically scan him, like you'll record his face with, once again, multiple cameras, same way they did Agent Smith 18 years ago. Record his face with multiple cameras. You basically get a 3D model from that, but then the AI takes that and it uses its AI to pick out the perfect pose match through all the different combinations of like morphing and warping the other face that's already been built.
Oh my goodness.
So, real quick, like that's a term that gets thrown around pretty often, and we understand what it means in this context. But like, just to quickly explain what that means, when you say an AI does that, what exactly does that mean? Like, we're talking.
So, like, let's say I smile, right? And you want a 3D model of my head that's me when I'm like 100 years old. I'm doing a time travel movie, right? And we have digital Niko's 100 years old. So somebody, maybe they scan my head, and then the artist goes in and manipulates it to make it look like it's old. Well, okay, so now they need to give it some poses. So like they need to give it a smile pose, a blink pose, a frown pose, like a mouth open, the E sound, the A sound, etc. So you have all these different poses. Now, the challenge becomes if you want to derive those poses with video, a computer needs to somehow take the shapes of your face and, make that the shapes of the other 3D face. Now, for something like your iPhone, if you have an iPhone, you have animojis and all that kind of stuff, which is doing just that. But that's basically just doing a basic, like, if the mouth is wide, turn the smile slider up. But that's not how human faces actually work. Like, people make their mouth go wide sometimes to smile, sometimes because they're about to run into a wall at 100 miles an hour. Like, there's a lot of reasons why you make the shapes with your face that you do. Mm-hmm. And so
running at 100 miles an hour, the shape is...
So the thing is, when they capture these performances, they need to figure out what collection of morph shapes, or basically poses, will replicate the shape that they're capturing.
And a computer is just really good at identifying that?
A computer's not that good at identifying it with just normal functions. It needs an AI to be like 2% blink and 3% smile and
well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
frown.
what is that AI? It's like, AI stands for artificial intelligence, but
right.
what that just means is that it's a program that's been specifically trained to do this. So it's like, all right, it's got the whole Rocky routine where it, drinks eggs and runs upstairs, and it's like at the end of the day, it's like, all right, I am a program that is very good at estimating poses, and that's the only thing it can do.
Yes, exactly. And to get there, it's you train it through trial and error until it's like, okay, now it's getting it figured out.
And it's weird that with this new training process, before it's like, aside from processing things, like you would ask a computer to do something and it would just do it instantly. But now it has to actually train like a person over a long period of time.
And learn, yes.
Which is just wild. It's becoming more human-like.
It's super crazy. And it's just because,
learning.
Computers have gotten not just faster, but they have more processing, more processors. Because we hit the top level speed of like a single processor, more or less, a little while ago. It's still getting better, but not the rate it was. But we made up for it just by putting 100 of them on a chip.
Yeah,
What does that 3090 have? 124 or something?
I don't know. No, we have the Threadripper, the AMD Ryzen Threadripper.
CPU,
okay.
The CPU
Yeah.
has
I see.
128.
It has 64 physical cores and 128 logical cores,
Jesus.
which like really took me by surprise when I was working on it. I'm like, wait, how many cores do I want to use? 128 cores? That's not what I think it is. Like the last time I had that option, my height, my max level was 16.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
went, like, there should be like 24 at most. Yeah.
Okay, but so for The Irishman and whatnot, it all starts with a real human performance.
Right.
And so for, Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, they put dots across the dude's face.
Right.
And then they had him actually do the performance. I forget the guy's name who was the actor for that. And yeah, he literally just did the entire show as himself with the rig capturing his facial movements so that they can actually use that to animate the digital face that they would then replace his whole head with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as we were talking about, that's not quite enough. And so now, all right, deepfakes.
Well, actually,
right?
can I just point out one thing? There's a problem that happens when you drive performances with people's skin.
Yes. Okay. I know what you're gonna say, and this is absolutely important.
I see it all the time. And like for the longest time, I've been trying to put my finger on it because we analyze this stuff all the time in VFX Artists React. And one of the challenges that we face on that show is put into words the problem that you're seeing. Which at a certain point, like if ILM has done the shot, like how are you going to manage to put into words what they couldn't? Like how do you break down what the problem is? And that's a huge challenge when we get to the high level stuff. But there's this one thing like about faces, animated faces, and they seem kind of slidey and weird. It's like, how do you describe it? What's the problem? And I think it's what we just said. It's that they are driving performance from the skin, but your face isn't driven from the skin. So like, for example, if I smile, and then you map that to another 3D model, it's going to pull the lips back kind of from the skin direction rather than the muscles beneath tightening and pulling the flesh up like a fleshy curtain, into the corners of the stage that is your smile.
It's kind of like inverse kinematics, but for skin. Inverse skinемatics.
Hey!
Yes.
So I had never thought about that. That's so true. That's a really good point.
Yeah. It's among the many other phenomena that are happening when you move your facial muscles, Like the one that always gets me is from Gemini Man, how Weta talked about, when you engage your muscles, it squeezes blood out of them and it changes the color. And you can see that when people go like this and then relax their forehead, you'll see the lines.
Yeah.
Like blood was squeezed out.
Yeah.
Without that, those are the things that you don't realize until you do the whole shot. And you're like, it still doesn't look real. What's wrong with it? And you're like, oh, the blood should be pushed out of the parts of the skin that are bunched up from the muscles. Like, what?
And it's like that's probably a pretty easy fix. It's probably just like a color map that's generated from kind of like ambient occlusion is just like, these two surfaces of the skin have gotten close to each other, make that a little lighter, and then have like a timed release. It's all probably just done kind of similar to like wet maps, for instance, for like wet pieces of ground or surfaces. My point is that it's probably far more complicated than this, but I feel like it's probably an easy solution to an unknown problem.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's like, oh, okay, now we can easily see all these things to try to fix that, and then it's probably pretty hard, but it was probably very achievable.
Yeah, but you had to have somebody put their finger on it first.
Exactly.
Yeah, us as humans are so good at identifying when something looks wrong, but we're not that good at identifying what looks wrong.
Or why, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes us to The Mandalorian.
Yes.
First, I think we should talk about what makes it good and what makes it bad.
Okay, and probably also how we think they did it, because I want to talk about that, because
Dude, I keep flip-flopping.
So we shot this episode of VFX Artists React, like 2 weeks ago? 1 week ago?
Yeah.
Like last week.
Yeah.
And this is, by the time you guys are all seeing this, it's been like maybe 2 weeks since we did that episode. And a few days since we recorded this. But totally lost my train of thought with that.
Well, we don't know how they did it.
Right, yeah. So Disney has been incredibly tight-lipped with how a lot of that stuff is done. I follow several effects artists from ILM and people who actually worked on stage at on the Mandalorian, like the Stagecraft stuff and the volume, and like they are all super tight-lipped. They're not allowed to talk about any of this stuff, and so because of it, there is no information online about how they did it. There's a few things we do know for a fact that they have released. We know that there was a stand-in actor. Mark Hamill was on set, but he was not the actual performer that you see on screen. So we do know that there was a head replacement And we also know
mystery.
we also know that the person who was on who was performing had dots on their face, and that's kind of the extent of what we know.
If it had been traditional CG, there's no reason they would keep that secret.
That's
they've done that a million times.
We do know that Disney does not want us to know that there's something that they know. We also know that this past summer of 2020, Disney released a technical paper on their own method of doing deepfakes, which has since been co-opted by the app FaceSwap.
Do you mean their own method as in a different kind of processing than the deepfakes we use, or just like a different software that does the same thing?
It's a slightly different process. And even the deepfake software, there's development that's gone to the software, but it's still just based on the architecture and the process of the very first deepfake.
So I think it's more of, instead of like the difference between like say After Effects and Fusion, like Blackmagic Fusion, or let's say the difference between Final Cut Pro and Premiere Pro.
Or Microsoft Word and Google Docs.
Sure. My point is that it's less that and more the difference between Macintosh and Windows.
Yeah.
They're both operating systems, but the way they are actually structured from the inside are different.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's almost like it's the realm of academics and research at this point, because you're dealing with like, well, if we approach an AI structured like this with these kind of layers, when we go through this process, we get this result. But if we do an AI structured like this with these kind of layers in this process, we get this result. That's what they're doing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those are two different deepfake things. But so for the Mandalorian, honestly, my first like analysis of that scene was that it wasn't a deepfake.
Interesting.
And I kind of died on that hill. Like I was like there are people on Twitter who are like, I'm pretty sure it's a deepfake. I thought it was a deepfake, and I was like, no, it's definitely not a deepfake.
Dude, I'm with you now.
You will lose this bet, sir. That is not a deepfake. And so I've since learned that, and I've since agreed that we do think it is huge asterisk deepfake.
Yes.
But there is a lot more to it than just that, and I think that's partly why I was misidentifying it, because it's not just a deepfake.
See, the first time I watched it, I'm like, oh, that's a deepfake. And then when I went back to watch, I'm like, wait, maybe it's not. See, I had the opposite reaction.
That's so strange. Okay.
And I think all of us want to believe a little bit that there's some sort of deep fakery going on in it, because I think we're all tired of just another CG head being put on a body and getting us 95% of the way there.
Yeah.
Like, I think we all want to see something brand new and inventive. But I think why you changed your mind, Wren, and why I changed my mind is that it's actually both. And we talk about this in the VFX React episode, but we have since studied that shot. Like,
we still don't know.
We still don't know.
But we think.
So let's talk about why it might be a deepfake. Like, what is it that makes it a deepfake? Like, why isn't it just a 3D model? What makes it different than a 3D model?
Ain't that the question of the day?
Ain't that the question?
Well, okay. I mean, first, I feel like I should explain why I think it was a 3D model.
Okay.
And it was because like the head shape was pretty good. I was like, okay, that it's Mark Hamill's head, and the animation was very, very minimal. I think they learned their lesson from like Leia of like, all right, the more you have him talk, it's not gonna look good. And that was what it was. I was like, wow, the talking just looks very like keyframed.
Yeah.
And I don't know. For me, honestly, it was the skin. It just didn't quite have that photoreal rendering quality to me. It had a little bit more of that. And again, every time I go back and look at it, I change my mind. So it's hard for me to say, but at first it just kind of looked a little too plasticky to me. And it made me also kind of wonder if maybe it was an actual like 3D head with a projection of Luke's face onto it.
That's what I kind of see the more I look at it.
Really? Okay. Like a 2.5D projection type thing.
Yeah, like a 2.5D projection type thing. Because the thing is, this is for a show. Like, this isn't for a movie. It's for all intents and purposes, a TV show. And to do a digital human, not to mention Luke Skywalker as your digital human, who has not been in a movie as young Luke Skywalker outside of that briefest of flashbacks.
For like 40 years.
Yeah, one of the most iconic characters in the world that has been sitting there, and everybody's been trying to figure out, how do I bring him back? How do I make some money off of Luke Skywalker? Disney's like, oh, we're going to take a shot here. So, like, but to do this for a TV show is pretty nuts, because any other situation, you're basically looking at spending millions of dollars hiring teams of probably at least 100 people to get you a 3D model that moves and looks and appears to be a person. So to just go the 3D model route seems completely impossible.
Just because it would require so much in order just to get to a baseline thing.
Time consumption wise.
Yeah, because it's like for Rogue One, it's like this is a full-on multi-$100 million movie. They have a budget for that. They probably
and a long
had
time to work on it.
Yeah, like 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
They probably had 3 weeks to do that shot, maybe 4.
For Mandalorian? Again,
don't know.
Estimates. We don't know.
Estimates.
But it could have been a rush job. It could have been something that they actually have been working on for the last 6 months.
Could be. But I do know that they basically had to turn around the whole season in like a year. And with that in mind, if you have 8 episodes, I mean, filming that thing's probably going to take 40 days. So that's, 2 months out of your year, almost gone right there. So now we got 10 months. It's like, then you got to edit the whole thing, get your edit into a spot where it's kind of locked. Like there's another 2 months. It pretty quickly boils down to you have 1 month to do the visual effects. Once again, I could be totally wrong. Maybe there's a little more time there. I'm sure there's also research happening, but you still have to even have the scripts written before you know what you have to research. But it puts you in an even tighter spot. Not only do you not have the budget of a movie, you don't have the time of a movie. So how do you create a digital human in that time?
Slavery.
Slavery.
No, I'm playing. That's a bad joke.
And I think just like how Stagecraft was a kind of a revolutionary thing that helped them solve a problem. That's where I feel like deepfakes are that thing. But the 2.5 projection is almost the same thing, because to me, when I looked at it, why I didn't think it was a 3D model is the texture. It's like there's so much detail in the picture of his face.
Yeah, it looks photoreal as a still.
Yeah. Now, either somebody sat there in Photoshop and made a single picture and they projected it onto his face, which is very unlikely because it's so inflexible. Because once again, this is also a TV show. They probably want a method that works for more scenes, And this is just them starting with that. Like, to get a 3D model looking like that, but then to not have it be fully animated doesn't make sense, or even fully lit. So this is the other thing, though, is that when you look at the lighting, like outside of the texturing and everything, the lighting's very smooth. It's like it doesn't quite match the rest of the scene. Look at Grogu, look at the Mandalorian, look at the lighting and
it's
how
a lot more harsh lighting on everyone else.
And Luke's very soft. It doesn't even match his robe really.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing that made me it felt like the brightness values were off across his face versus the rest of the shot. Like his robe was much darker.
Yeah.
And it just kind of looked like his face was just lifted.
Yeah.
And that could have been like a color grading thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Could have been, but that's the thing that's a flag that says, "Hey, I'm not a 3D model." Okay. It's like a 3D model is like, you want to cast a shadow on a 3D model? Yeah, you can do that for days. Like we got shadows galore. They can be the sharpest, the fuzziest. It doesn't matter. Shadows are easy. Reflections, yeah, you can make them chrome if you want to, but to do a 3D model and not light it at all.
Luke Chrome Walker.
It's much more like a warpy image. That's once again, it's like, what's going on here? This isn't your average 3D thing.
Yeah.
So warping an image is also way too janky. So there's got to be something going on. And it's just when you connect the dots of hey, they've done deepfake research, they're trying to figure out, it feels like it's a deepfake process. But what they did is recorded a dude, put a CG Luke head on top of him, and then deepfaked on the CG head to get their deepfake. That's what it feels like. That's what kind of the sense that I get from it.
Which also, it makes sense.
It does make sense.
Because the main things that a CG Luke Skywalker will lack will be detail. Right. And that's where a deepfake will shine. It'll bring back that detail.
It'll give you the little folds in your eyelids. It'll do all those little...
the moles on Luke's face, the little scar on his lip.
You could achieve that with texture work.
Sure. But if you have enough time and effort.
If you have enough time and effort. But what you probably won't be able to achieve is the exact way that Mark Hamill's eyelids fold when he drops his eyebrows down.
All the physics of the face.
Yeah, the way the corners of his mouth curl when he talks.
And so we're saying that this CG head would be animated the same way like Lola has been doing faces in the past, where it's...
Probably simpler even.
Simpler, like the iPhone Animojis way, where you have some morph targets and you have an AI analyze the footage and apply those morph targets to the 3D model.
I mean, looking at the show, I think it's just an animator, just straight up dialed in the keyframes.
Yeah, I mean, those the mouth going from closed to smiling or whatever is very smooth and uniform,
and it hits a pose. If you look at his mouth, in frame by frame, you'll see it hit a pose each time, and the whole mouth hits it at the same time, and then changes directions at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah. So that is why we think it is that process. So it's 3D head and then a deepfake on top of that. And so and that's what we end up seeing. But the end result looks pretty good, but it's still off enough that people a lot of people I follow on Twitter were having an adverse reaction to it. They're like, "Oh wow." My favorite reaction was Jimmy Wong's reaction. He was like, "How come The dudes at South Park did that Sassy Justice video and did deepfakes that look 1,000,000 times better than what Disney is putting out in The Mandalorian. Like, why?
Yeah, how come, Niko?
Is this a setup?
How come, Niko?
And I basically was like, listen, people just assume, excuse me, people just assume that...
Excuse me, I need to yell once in a while. I got a lot of rage built up.
People just assume that all of these VFX warehouses are already at the forefront of technology research when it comes to all this stuff. And the reality is that over the last couple of years, that's not exactly the case, specifically when it comes to deepfakes. Because no one really knows how they're doing it. It's just a bunch of like white papers online that people with free time are like, yeah, sure, I'll do this in my free time. Whereas, you know, a studio, they have production workflows, they have a pipeline, and they have deadlines and budgets that they cannot really, they don't have that much room to maneuver and experiment that much with.
They'll face legal action if they don't meet their deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, and so I don't think people realize that deepfakes aren't quite at a point yet, or at least they haven't been, where they can be easily implemented into the workflow of a studio proper.
Yeah.
Whereas Deep Voodoo, the company behind Sassy Justice, which you are affiliated with, it's the only company on the planet that is a deepfake specialized company, and they hired all of the deepfake artists that are good. They like everyone on YouTube that you're like, hey, that guy made a cool deepfake. Well, chances are he probably works at Deep Voodoo now.
Yeah, you know, and just to talk about Deep Voodoo for a second. So last year, I had the opportunity of working with this new company that the South Park people started, called Deep Voodoo VFX. And the idea behind Deep Voodoo is for them to, I mean, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but basically what they've announced publicly is the idea of the company is to basically deliver the promise of, you know, deep learning based visuals. Deepfakes being an example of that. Because the thing about AI, and I mean, I'm kind of using AI a little inappropriately here. Deep learning or machine learning is what we're talking about here. Machine learning is, when you boil down, it's the computer training. It's trying something, it fails, try something, does a little bit better, try something, does a little bit better, eventually gets good at doing
and
something.
iterating, yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, in a nutshell, it's machine learning. A very tiny, simplified nutshell. So the problem with deep learning, though, is that the system you build, you put something in and you get something out. You don't control the guts, because the computer does that. That's what the training's for. But in the world of like film, or heck, even just in the world of business, like you need control. You know, you don't, like, let's say the director's like, all right, I want a nice, beautiful, stormy sky. And the AI generates a perfect stormy sky. And the director's like, I want the cloud on the left. And the AI's like, well, I don't do that. I just give you what I give you and you have to deal with it.
Nah, dude. Nah.
That's the challenge with AI. And that's partially why it's just not everywhere yet in visual effects or anything. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons, but the deep Voodoo guys and that company, you know, their goal is to tackle this process of being able to let you use, you know, or let you get cool visuals and creative things from deep learning, machine learning. Yeah. And the thing that we focused on this past year was deepfakes. So if you check out the Sassy Justice YouTube channel, you'll get to see some of that in action.
Which
pretty crazy.
Are objectively some of the best deepfakes released ever.
Oh yeah. Definitely that the Trump deepfake / Sassy Justice deepfake. There's nothing else like that out there. Yeah. And
looks amazing.
And it's not just it's not like there's a, you know, hey, we have a secret program. You know, it's like, it's people that know what they're doing from the very start to the very end, having worked it all out.
Yeah, because they have a lot of experience. Plus, when you guys are all working together, you come up with your own sort of like methods to even make things better. Yeah. And so it's like that, and that's why. Yeah. Those artists are not working at Island. They're not working at, you know, Pixamundo or MPC or Weta or Lola. And so, you know, this is a really good example of it really depends on the person rather than like the prestige of a team. You know, it's like, I'm sure that any number of those people working at those companies, if they sat down and actually just started focusing on learning how to do this, it could easily become a good deepfake artist.
Oh yeah, totally. But Niko's been teaching me in the last week, and I feel like I'm like halfway there.
Yeah, but also the challenge with deepfakes too is that there's no manual. Mm-hmm. There's no history behind it. It's literally everything you're learning, you are figuring out potentially for the first time on the planet. But working with the Deep Voodoo team was amazing though. Like everybody there is incredible, and looking at The Mandalorian, it's like, but what if? What if?
Yeah, speaking of what if.
What if?
What if we tried to do the Mandalorian shot?
Indeed. What if we tried to do the Mandalorian shot and made it better?
So as of recording this podcast, this is Tuesday, the day before the presidential inauguration, 2021. That is the day of the week. And this is coming out on Thursday, and the deepfake stuff will be coming out over the weekend. We got VFX Artists React Saturday. Ideally, if all goes to plan, the crew episode talking about all this stuff comes out on Sunday. And that video is where our time has been spent the last week or two.
Yes, we've been setting out to do our version of The Mandalorian and to try to do the hardest thing in visual effects. And that's to replicate a human being. Yes.
No, okay, no, quick to point out. Other people on YouTube have already deepfaked Luke Skywalker from The Mandalorian. They've already done their own deepfake on that. What's the core problem with that, though, Niko?
The core problem with it. Look, I don't want to say there's a problem with it. Look, Shamook, if you're watching this, we're talking about you, okay?
Oh, I wasn't. No, I was saying like.
No, that's not the core. Like, the core thing
most
is
of the
that
work's already been.
Yeah, most of the work's already been done.
That's what I'm saying.
It looks better. The deepfake on top of Luke and Mandalorian looks so much better for most of it. And
There
so,
are bits where it falls apart, like the stiffness of the lips.
yes, when you look at the performance, it goes from what was already pretty cardboard and stiff to just straight up. It's just stone faced. It's like the lips move like a millimeter when he
But
talks.
those highlights are way sharper.
Oh yeah, and just the detail around the eyelids looks better, and the lighting looks better. Like
Looks more like a person.
But like we
yeah.
saw the same thing with like Princess Leia. You know, like ILM put all of this money and effort into making a Princess Leia from A New Hope look photoreal again, and it's like, eh. But then someone threw a deep fake on it with a, you know, like you see the media sites like, oh, guy fixed Superman's mustache with a $500 PC. Why couldn't they have done that? It's like, well, okay, it's already pretty good. It's like most of the way there. And then when you throw a deep fake on top of it, it just makes it better.
And I think by the third time, they're like, all right, we're going to do CG Luke, and no one's going to tell us that deep faked it this time because we're going to deep fake it ourselves. And so it's like, well, I deep faked your deep fake and it looks better. It's like,
But it does beg the question. It's like, okay, if
Why
it
didn't
looked
they do
better
it?
with a deep fake, why didn't they do that?
That's a good
then?
question.
That's a good question. And when you think about it, why didn't they do that? And it's maybe because they don't really have much of a deep faking team working on it.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, it's like we are literally on the frontier of machine learning in visual effects. And that stuff doesn't exist yet.
But that is part of what I really like about Star Wars, especially like Mandalorian, is that like it is the location for pushing VFX boundaries.
Seriously.
Between the stagecraft, all of the crazy, you know, things that they had to pioneer for the show to be so efficient.
The freaking volume. I feel like people aren't psyched enough about the volume.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
To be fair, I feel like everybody in the industry is all like, "Hey, you got a volume? Hey, we got those volumes around."
Okay. I guess I'm talking
I feel
about
like it's
people.
been getting
I guess
proper.
I've just been talking to Niko, who is very anti-volume, and I'm
That's right,
upset
I'm
about it.
anti-volume.
I'm upset about it.
No, I'm not
Niko's not
anti-volume.
anti-volume. Niko just can very easily come across as very jaded about a lot of things. And as soon as he's like tired of hearing about something, he's officially jaded. And we've heard a lot about the volume over the last year or two because it's like it has been the biggest technology to come out in filmmaking over the last couple decades. It's certainly the most exciting thing in my opinion.
In my defense, part of my jadedness comes from the other dudes at the studio here going, "Hey, let's build a volume." I'm like, "Guys, we don't need a volume." They're like, "No, we could do so many cool things." So they're like, "Guys, it's like gonna be so hard to build a volume." But
Niko can do so many cool things.
None of us are actually saying we should build a volume. We know how much it costs. The Stagecraft from for Mandalorian, that's like $100 million set. Like we don't have
Here's my
that.
thing: is we just need one wall. Just one wall.
Just one.
Just one wall.
We don't even need a floor. We just need one wall.
I am,
we can
I
use
am
LEDs for the rest.
I am hoping to
projector for this
experiment a
thing.
little bit with using our giant TV as a background, which is nothing new. Like we've been able to do that for a while. The thing that sets the Stagecraft apart is the fact that the TV is bright and it's large. It's the brightness that really matters because that's what actually affects the lighting.
Yeah.
It has to be like an HDR TV.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no,
It has
a
to be like
TV.
an actual like concert display panel.
Yeah, like it has to actually be an LED light rather than just a lit pixel.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And the density of those LED lights has to be high enough so they don't get any band.
Yeah, just a
Alright.
couple years before they started actually filming The Mandalorian, the technology for the LEDs wasn't quite there. The the LEDs weren't dense enough. And so what you ended up with was that moire effect. You know, anytime you take a picture of your computer monitor and you get like those weird rainbow lines, that's what they were getting on their cinema cameras behind the actors using the screens. Is you had to be far enough away to not get that.
Hey, I mean, we're putting our stuff on YouTube. 1080p, lawless resolution.
All right.
With rainbows in the background.
Niko is officially
deliver
dated.
me a Mandalorian season script, and I will get you the volume.
Easy. Easy. The quality of those scripts.
Yeah. Never mind. Okay, but here's the thing. We've been working on something, I think, pretty big these past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because when you looked at that Luke's shot, it looked good when it wasn't moving. But once it started moving, it was super stiff. The lighting was very static and flat and not really physically accurate. And it's basically just like kind of just having a picture there moving around a little bit. And you know what? We know that we can deepfake Luke Skywalker. I mean, people already know that people can deepfake stuff. And I'm sure people are like, well, why don't they just deepfake the scene? That wouldn't get us there. Just deepfaking the shot wouldn't get us there. I mean, you could put a deepfake on a deepfake, but that's great. Good job. You had people blow millions of dollars getting you that shot, and then you put a deepfake on top of it and made it 2% better. And granted, it's better, but that's not the same thing. That's you just putting a filter on it, basically. Like, we wanted to take it from the ground up and do the effect and try to do it how we would approach it.
It's like, pretend we were sitting in their shoes.
Yes.
All right, we are now the production team going into filming the final episode of The Mandalorian. We are both the on-set VFX supervisors shooting the shot and the VFX artists doing the shot.
Yes.
How would we have done it differently? Granted, we don't know how they did it, but this is how we would have done it. And we did it.
Yes. And the thing is, visual effects is still a magic trick. There's a lot of visual effects that just work, right? But a good visual effect is still a magic trick. And it's not something you just do after the fact. It's something you do in conjunction with the filmmakers, in conjunction with the story. It's, you know, the director shouldn't just ever throw you the shot and be like, put an explosion in. That you're going to get garbage. And that's honestly why a lot of VFX shots are garbage. So in this case, we had to think about, like, from the very beginning, how are we going to film this to make it look more real? And not in the way that they did it in The Mandalorian. It was like, well, we'll just have him stand still and not move at all. It's like, no. How do we make it even more lifelike? How do we breathe vibrance into Luke Skywalker and make him feel like he's there? Well, answer number one, lighting. You know, this is the thing they talk about in drawing. If you draw something on a piece of paper, put a shadow between the object and the paper. Like, let's say you're drawing a sphere. You put a shadow below that sphere, and suddenly that sphere is sitting on the paper. It's connected to the paper. It's part of the world. Just like that song from Aladdin or whatever. No, Little Mermaid, right? Part of your world? Anyways. So it's the same thing with CG. And we talked about this a lot, where, like, when you have strong directional lighting for your scene, and it's hitting like a CG object in the scene, it brings the two together because you have lighting that unifies the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And so we went back and we redid the scene, and we did it with really strong side lighting. And what this does is, like, it gives, you know, lets you see all the volume, it lets you see all the shape of Luke, but the deepfake also does a good job of replicating that lighting. So it's playing to a strength of the deepfake plus just a strength of visual art, which is strong lighting binds the whole scene together. But we didn't stop there, because we had our lighting move.
Interactive lighting.
Interactive lighting. Starting with, of course, the lightsaber. And if you played video games and you're into, like, graphics of video games, you'll notice how, like, static lighting's kind of cool, but once the light starts moving through a scene and shadows start moving and, like, you know, the surfaces kind of feel like they change. You're like, ooh, I like
Yummy
that. My eyeballs like that. And so, like, you know what? Let's do that too. So the lightsaber goes up by his face, and then he turns it off. And there's sparks because he just, you know, there's just a big fight. So, like, you know, the door is broken behind him. So every once in a while, a big shower of sparks comes down and lights him up. And all this lighting suddenly is like, it's like flexing. It's like flexing your CG. It's like, oh yeah, I got a CG Luke. Watch this. I can put lights wherever I want. Ooh, light on the left, right on the right. The lights are just spinning all over. And it's like, wow, it looks really good while you're doing all that. It's like, sure does.
CG flex.
But everything from, like, you know, having the lighting make his face match his shoulders to having the lighting make the person in the foreground match the background, it brings it all together, and having it move makes it alive.
I think we forgot to talk about why they put a CG head on the stunt double.
Oh, you're right.
On the stunt double, the person who performed as Mark Hamill.
Cover that real quick. You talk about that real quick.
Yeah. So the reason being is that Niko, you're always saying a deepfake is just a mask. You could put a mask on someone and they don't look like that person because everything else other than the face doesn't work.
Right.
And what that means is that you know, if the shape of the head is wrong, you could put a deep fake on someone, but the shape is still wrong.
Right.
And so what they ended up, that's why we think they had to use a CG head, because the person who was performing probably didn't have the same shape of head as Mark Hamill. So they had to actually create that shape from scratch by putting in Mark Hamill's head digitally.
Yep. Okay.
And then deep fake it.
That being said, having looked at a ton of pictures of Mark Hamill's face doing this deepfake and then looking back at the Mandalorian shot, I don't know if they did that because his jaw is fat.
It's different looking, right?
Yeah.
That was what I was noticing today when we were shooting Dean. It was like, wait a minute, that still doesn't look like Mark Hamill's head shape.
It looks like they crossed Mark Hamill with like a football dude.
They probably wanted to make him feel a little bit older. I mean, I think that's a good description. He does kind of look like a cross between Mark Hamill and football dude. But I think they wanted to look a little bit older. But it's also not just, you know, the head shape from the front. There's parts where he bends over to pick up Grogu, for example. A deepfake only does your face. Like once you can't see my eyes, my mouth, like you're not in deepfake territory anymore, or my ears. Like,
and that's why we think that whole shot was just a digi head.
Yeah, and why they probably just had a digital head to begin with. It also lets them control the performance. You get into some things around, you know, like if Mark Hamill's not doing the performance, is it okay for another dude to be doing the performance, or do we need to capture Mark Hamill's performance, aka film him with a camera, then have an animator match the video to a CG head? Like, because I feel like that's what they did.
And they were very careful about having Mark Hamill involved every step of the process, so they don't run into that weird territory.
They wanted to make this Luke was played by Mark. They wanted to really make that clear. And so I bet
it's a lot about the messaging there.
Yeah, it's, you know, he did the voice, which, by the way, was AI augmented.
It was completely resynthesized.
Yeah.
Well, there's a few lines where you can hear it where it sounds like Google Maps talking to you.
So he did the voice and they enhanced that. And he probably did the performance. He probably did literally did the entire performance. And they've also probably had a face capture with him, not with tracking markers per se, but just a performance capture. And then they used all of that to inform the performance. And yeah, there's a body double there, but I don't, his face probably isn't driving the animation. So that's another reason why they'd have a CG head. Because then they can say that Mark did the performance.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring that up is because we are shooting with Dean.
Yeah.
We chose Dean because his face structure is the closest out of all of us to match Mark Hamill.
He also loves Star Wars.
And yeah, this is his dream come true. He was born for this role.
Yes.
But yeah, so we're like, okay, cool. Problem solved, right? Correct head shape. And then we shot it. And then we discovered, oh yeah, there's a lot more to it than just head shape. It's the neck, it's the shoulders, it's the posture, the hair.
The ears.
The ears, yeah. And we're like, wow, that's Mark Hamill's face, but what is this monstrosity? It's like we thought we were on the right track and we got it totally wrong. So
we had to redo the whole thing.
We redid, but we used that as an informative lesson because we knew, okay, so Dean's neck is longer than Mark Hamill's. He's got shoulders that kind of slope downwards more than Mark as well. And so that we essentially just kind of costumed him up. Mm-hmm. We added shoulder pads. We got a
dolled
wig.
Him up. We dolled him up.
Yeah. We got him the Queen's Gambit wig.
No, it was the Julie Andrews Sound of Music wig.
Oh, yes. We got him a wig, and we styled it to look as closely as possible to Mark Hamill's hair.
Also, shout out to Jordan for doing
Jordan
a great
did an
job
amazing
with that.
We literally spray painted the wig, by the way. Yeah. With brown spray paint.
Yeah, because I went in there, I was like, is it possible to make it less like clumpy? And she's like, yeah, but every time I comb it, all the paint comes out. And I was like, oh, gotcha. Okay, that's okay. But okay, so that was our first lesson. It was like, okay, we got pretty close through this whole time. We are training, doing all the deepfake stuff in the background. Yeah. And getting a pretty solid model of Luke Skywalker. Yeah. Trained off of Dean's face.
And by the way, the 3090 is amazing.
Yeah.
What an amazing GPU. I have never gotten a model with 1 million iterations before.
Really? Wow.
But I did on this project.
Wow.
1 million iterations.
1 million?
It's crazy. The Keanu Reeves one was like 150,000.
Yeah,
dang,
that's the thing because
and that was at 128 pixels.
I feel like we entered the scene of deepfakes pretty early on-ish in the scope of things with the Tom Cruise and Keanu Reeves videos, but those were 2 years ago.
I know.
Like,
dude, looking back at that Tom Cruise one, It's like, ooh, baby
It's
deepfake.
awful. I think, honestly, looking back on the Tom Cruise one, I don't think is that good.
Dude,
No.
but honestly, props to you, Niko, for diving in head first,
Just
right when that
committed.
stuff
And especially
started.
with the title, we made the world's best deepfake.
At the time, nobody had done anything like it.
That is true, because it was more than just the deepfake visual. It was combining it with the performance. That was the special magic we brought to the table with that.
Yeah. And it's the special magic we brought to the table here as well.
Yeah.
Because Luke's performance, in my opinion, sorry if anybody who worked on The Mandalorian's listened to this, but I thought it was pretty wooden. And that's the thing
Wooden?
number 2, wooden.
I was gonna say stone. No, it was very stiff. It was like I definitely got the feeling that everyone on set was like, all right,
You play it
we
safe.
don't really know what we're doing. Let's play this safer than safe.
Yeah.
Which
Don't
is
do
weird.
anything. Just nod your head like.
It is
I
weird.
Because
am.
if they hadn't done that, it would have been much better.
Well, unless they couldn't handle the animation.
Yeah, that's the risk.
Yeah.
You know, is that like if they did try to go a little bit more and then they couldn't deliver, they're screwed.
It's like, yeah, what's the worst thing that can happen? Just not delivering the final effect shots for the finale of Disney's biggest show in the world right now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what's at stake.
The stakes are high.
So play it safer than safe.
It's a steakhouse.
It makes sense. This is the thing that we don't have to do at a YouTube studio, but they have to do.
Okay, but still, you just like, okay, last take, let's do one where you're more expressive. Go. And
You're
then
right.
you just have it.
You're right, Peter. But once you hit editing, you still got to commit to the safer.
Yeah,
That's
it's,
true.
again,
That's true.
we're still talking about traditional workflows and pipelines, and it's like, yeah, we as a YouTube studio, we have
Let's just push the video a day.
we have Luke Skywalker giving the Tashi Station line, and
I'm so
that is
excited
not
to see that.
something ILM or Disney would have ever put out.
Yeah. So, we have the lighting, but then deepfakes handle performances pretty well. So we're going harder on the performance. We're changing the angles on the head. He's looking around. He's moving a little bit. Like, it's just, we are constantly demonstrating, like, hey, this isn't flat. This is real. It moves. It looks. It breathes. It smiles. It reacts. There's lights that shine on it. It's there. It's real. And then the crazy thing about all this is that at no point are we touching a 3D model. It's
Yeah.
all driven by a human being.
Yeah.
Good classic makeup. Like, we spent more than an hour on that wig. We spent multiple hours tracking wigs down and all that kind of stuff.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
It wasn't hard work spent on our computer. That was hard work spent just getting stuff looking good. Once again, shout out to Jordan Christian for all that hard work.
Dude, I mean pre-production.
Yeah. And
That's the theme of The Mandalorian is pre-production.
Yeah.
The whole idea behind Stagecraft is you have to do all your VFX first.
yeah.
You have to create your scenes. You have to create your environments and textures and all that stuff and build it out. And then you build out your set and then you film it.
And then you're
Yeah.
done. And then that's it.
So yeah, it's like deepfake was a part of this, but also just putting in the time to like get the costume right and to get the wig right, to get the performance right, to get the lines right. We had Dean match the cadence, so we can use the lines that are already from the show.
Dean's a good actor, by the way.
Yeah,
He did a great job performing.
And that's the other crazy thing about all this. It's not just a performance. It's a puppet.
Yes. Okay. I think I know where you're about to go with this too.
Yeah. And this is another thing that I think Hollywood really struggles with. Some actors totally get this because some actors are pros, but other actors have different ways they've learned.
Some actors are not pros.
Yeah. But I think a lot of the people that do work on like the big movies, like in the Marvels and things like that, I think they understand this concept of being a puppet because that's kind of what you are sometimes, or you're the puppet master. In this case,
puppet.
the deepfake is being driven by the puppet master. The puppet master is Dean, and he's using his face to drive the puppet, the mask that is the deepfake. So for example, Luke, his eyebrows don't sit as low as Dean's eyebrows do. So if Dean relaxes his face, it looks like Luke is kind of furrowing his brows. So Dean needs to raise his eyebrows a little bit to just look like a normal, neutral Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, so Dean as Luke Skywalker is walking around with a mildly surprised look on his face just to deliver a Luke that is, passive.
Normal. Yeah. And that's a thing where, like, as a performer and as an actor, you need to be able to do these things and then set that, like, calibrate that as your neutral point and then act on top of that. And once again, this is something we learned from basically shooting it, going through the process and going,
He looks angry.
Yeah,
He looks
yeah.
creepy. He's stealing that baby. I don't know what he's going to do with it.
Exactly. Also, we learned that when you give Luke Dean's jawline, he turns into Henry Cavill. plus the brow furrow, just a little bit of the brow furrow. Then it's exactly Henry Cavill. I think it's the chin
And the
cleft.
cleft jaw, yeah.
Yeah. So like having Dean not just do a performance, just go on there, I'm just Luke Skywalker and doing his thing, like, but having him drive the mask as a puppet master, knowing that he has to raise his eyebrows more as a neutral pose and the things he does from there, changes the expression. His smiles need to be bigger than usual. Mark Hamill doesn't show his top row of teeth very often. He smiles and like expresses with his bottom row of teeth.
Like never.
Yeah, and Dean is the opposite. So we have some really weird looking deep fakes where Dean smiles, and then like it's Mark Hamill smiling, and you're like, ugh,
It's like baby teeth.
where all these teeth come from?
Because that's the crazy thing about a deepfake is that if an image for a pose hasn't ever been captured, it cannot generate it.
Exactly.
It can only generate what it's already seen. And so because there is no images of Mark Hamill smiling with his top teeth, when you're trying to make a deepfake Mark Hamill smile with his top teeth, the deepfake AI doesn't really know what to do. It's like,
how about this?
Here's some teeth, because it did all the pre-training on just a whole bunch of human faces, but they're not Mark Hamill's teeth, so it ends up kind of looking like a little monsterish.
Yeah, you get some weird, horrible stuff.
From the training I was doing, I was definitely seeing anytime we were looking up his face, like looking, if you could see both nostrils, it was just like burn victim fake.
Okay, that being said, have you seen it recently? Because over the weekend, it fully figured those out, and it definitely
Really?
looks jankier. But we have the
On my model, it's
angles
still
like
not
those
quite
now.
there yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? On the one on my computer, it's pretty damn good.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay, so progress report. We reshot Dean today with
With the
updated
wig,
wig, updated costume,
lighting.
updated performance, all that stuff. And you've already run a single export of a deepfake over the top of that.
Yes, literally, we were late to this podcast because we were seeing the results of it for the first time.
Yeah. And what that means is that it's not been trained on that yet. We haven't done any compositing either. No magic. It's literally like, all right, here's some new inputs, export now. No training, no time, just export what you got. And it looked pretty dang good. Even it's super rough. It's got a lot of rough edges to it, but even that is just like, oh my God, like we might actually do it.
We might actually do it. And that's the crazy thing is like, we might actually do it. I think we are managing to deliver a shot that when he takes his hood off, people go like, holy cow, that's Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And the scene continues and it's just, he's here. He's real. He's in the scene performing. And there's no weirdness about it. There's no lips moving weird. There's no 3D rendering incorrectly. There's no lighting acting up. It's just natural. And nothing inside of me, outside of my brain, knowing that Luke can't be there, is telling me that it's wrong.
I mean, it's still not at 100% yet.
Not at 100% yet.
But it's the potential is so obvious that it's just like, wow. Like when we started off this whole project, like we threw around title ideas of like, we did Luke Skywalker better than Disney. And it's like, the clickbait type thing there. And at the same time, I'm like, but like, we probably won't though. We'll probably get like kind of close, but like, it's probably not going to actually be better. But after seeing today, I'm like, well, crap. I mean,
Yeah, it's kind of better.
like, wow.
It's kind of better. And like, that's the thing too, is like, there's like the YouTuber edge on things like, oh, Disney, like my shot's better. You use a $500 computer. Like,
yeah, no disrespect to the people who worked super hard on this stuff. All these people who spent hours and hours.
yeah, but the thing is like, now that like, we try to be respectful, like, cause that world is so tough and there's so much going on. Like, I'm not even gonna get into it here, but like, so to just be like, oh, we're gonna make it better. Like, it's like, no, you're not. Like, even if it looks better visually, like, you have no idea the constraints they had. Like, there's no way you could deliver what they delivered in the amount of time they had. They're still better.
Because they're the pros.
They're the pros. But
But that being said, results speak for themselves.
yes,
It's an explicit, like, objective result that we are going to deliver to the internet, and
we'll see what the internet thinks.
Just the incomplete stuff I was seeing today, I was kind of blown away.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, all right. Title this video whatever you want now. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah,
It just seems it's so arrogant when we kind of like call it like that, but at the same time, it's like if you can back it up and it's that kind of title that gets views, it's like, I don't know. We haven't really
confident
talked.
without it. Wait, what is it? Arrogance is confidence without proof. But we got proof.
Yeah, I mean, subjective proof. We haven't. I mean,
That's true.
Sam's first reaction was like, "Ugh, that looks fake."
Dude,
That was literally
great.
his first reaction after all of us were like, "Wow, this looks so good," and Sam's like, "Ugh."
I thought he was just yanking our chain, man.
I mean, maybe.
I think he's just trying to keep our heads from getting too high in those clouds.
Whatever makes
Sam.
you sleep at night, Niko.
Or was it just a play on the word deepfake?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. That being said, we are now currently full on in effects mode now.
Yeah.
Clint's kicking out some keyed out shots because we shot Dean against a.
This is a whole nother weird story.
It was a green screen, blue screen. We lit a green screen with blue lights to make it a blue screen.
The official term is GRU screen.
Grugu screen?
GRU screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole other weird thing. I don't know how much we talked about that in the video, but yeah, anyway. That's why I
Basically, we just took a green screen and
on?
blasted it with blue lights, so now it's a blue screen.
But it worked so well.
It worked really well.
It worked really well.
The whole idea is that we don't have a blue screen, but he's got a green lightsaber. You can't just have a green lightsaber on a green screen. So let's light the green screen with blue light.
Yeah. Because a while back, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Carmichael. We were lighting a green screen. He's like, you turn the light to green. I'm like, wait, our lights can do any color now, and you just made the light green. So the green screen is more green. Genius. We don't need any other colors in the green screen. Why would you ever use any other colors?
And it makes it way easier to key out.
Yeah. But then there was the whole like, oh no, we need a blue screen. But what if? If you only provided the blue spectrum of light.
Yeah, and shooting it that way created a lot of blue lights and a lot of blue spill, and that overall influenced the final shot a lot more because once you were done with the lightsaber, you turned off the blue light and went back to stock green screen. And that was when I was like, that doesn't look good at all. No. I was like, it's on a green screen, but like the lighting is all different. Yeah. And it's because you're actually lighting the scene differently.
Yeah, because all the Luke Skywalker deepfakes, they're trained from the images from Return of the Jedi in this case. And the movie is either shot outdoors and daylight's kind of bluish, or it's shot at nighttime with blue lights. There isn't a lot of Luke Skywalker shot with green lights, but there's a lot of Luke Skywalker shot with blue lights, or at least slightly blue lights. So even if the blue is like a little spill suppressed out, like you still have that influence on the skin tone. And the deepfake looked better with that blue influence versus the green influence.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, our final step here is we're actually compositing in a different background with the stuff that we shot of Dean, and we're making final VFX shots as if Dean is the new actor playing Luke Skywalker, not Mark Hamill. And so then that's our final shot. And that's what we're taking to actually run through the deepfake. Our final, once all the training is done, we're going to train it on those final composited shots.
Yes.
And why is that, Niko?
Because the deepfake, it doesn't exist in the world of floating point and high bit depth, this and that, and, raw imagery. It's just, you're going to give it color, and it's going to give you the face, a different face, same colors, boom, that's it. So we want to do that at the end once we have all our colors locked in. Just do the face swap then, done. I mean,
because the keying process where you take out the green screen changes some of the colors.
Yeah, because you have the spill suppression, which is going to mute the blues or mute the greens.
Where you get some of the
tones.
green lighting on the edge of the actor, you have to do a process to remove that.
Yes.
So it influences the colors.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a really tricky thing about green screens and blue screens is that you end up with the green and blue light hitting your actor, and it's not particularly pretty.
And then you have edges that, if you have hair, you're trying to key out all that stuff.
Yeah, man.
I'm
if we
subtly
had
shifting this back to a volume.
Yeah, man.
talk here.
If only we had an LED wall.
You know what, guys? I'm gonna somehow make an AI that can do green screen keying smartly, and then we won't have to worry about this anymore.
Oh,
But
man.
will it put the lighting from the surrounding set on the actor?
In the world of AI, that might be entirely possible.
Awesome. I'm all for it.
I think all of this stuff, this AI talk, deep learning, machine neural nets, all this stuff, I think I said some words out of order there. But
the neural nets.
this is evolving far more rapidly than I think most people realize.
Yeah.
This is evolving at a really fast rate, an exponential rate. And I don't think people fully recognize that rate.
Yeah, I think we're just realizing in a very limited slice of our life, here's a deep fake. And it's like, whoa, this is game changing for us. Not just because I can go and make a character, but like to just realize a digital human so well and in a way that doesn't involve 3D animation or even really a ton of input from the creator. Like it just does it.
Dude, if you want some existential dread, don't watch Black Mirror. Watch 2 Minute Papers on YouTube.
Yeah. Dude, oh man, the DALL-E AI. Yeah. We're going to hit a point here. This is another podcast for another time. But yeah, we should talk about AI in VFX in general, which happens to be the next Corridor Crew video.
Ooh,
also,
fancy.
Yeah, using AI tools for VFX. It's kind of a new thing. The dude who played, I forget his name. He was the lead actor in Ready Player One. Do you remember his name?
No.
Oh,
I know it. It's right
tip
on
of my tongue.
I want to say his name was like
Spielberg.
Ty or something like that.
Yeah.
Something
Ty
like that.
Sheridan.
That's him?
Yeah.
Okay. He started a VFX company primarily using AI tools.
What? Him, the actor?
Yeah.
Epic.
Right? That's pretty sweet. I forget that. I literally forget all of the important details.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like him and some partners are just trying to leverage the evolving AI landscape of computer-generated VFX tools.
Wow.
And he's got a VFX company now.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. But that's about all I know about that.
The tricky thing is making a company that leverages AI for like non-AI things before the pendulum swings so far that just AI does the entire thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll have AI to do my rotoscoping. It's like, you can just, the AI can make the whole scene, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. AI can just make the whole movie though, right? Oh yeah, I guess I don't need that thing that does the scene. I'll just have it make the whole movie. AI made movies obsolete and you just live within another reality, right? And it's like, oh yeah, shit.
I can definitely foresee in the future, like, I don't know how many years out, it's however many years you think it's going to be less, but it's at some point, we're going to have a stamp of pride that this was made by humans.
Oh, man.
This script was written by a person.
Mm-hmm.
The person who did this effect was a person.
Yeah, you talk to people and it's like, yeah, but the AI will never replicate the human spirit. It's like, I don't know, man. Human spirit's pretty replicatable.
Not to mention just AI assisted everything. It's like writing a script. Like, what should happen next? Like, well, if you look at all the other scripts that have ever been written, here's the 3 best ideas you could do. It's like, oh, I'll do that one. And the next scene, like, what's this character's name? It's like, well, if you look at all the stories that are written, here's the best 3 names for this moment. It's like, that's a good one.
Actually, yeah, no, that's the idea behind generative design. I know I'm starting to go off on a new tangent here at the end of this podcast, but generative design is the idea in like CAD modeling. You say you got to design a structure or a chair, for instance. You just input like some constraints, like, okay, it must have 4 points of contact with the ground and it must hold this much weight at this height. And then it literally designs thousands of models with different kind of constraints and all, like, you end up with these really weird organic shapes just to design a chair. And you go through and it's like, okay, all of these ones, not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking more at like these. And then it takes those and it expands another 1,000 just off of those few designs. And you slowly just start like picking and choosing until you iterate like literally hundreds of thousands of different designs to choose just the one that you want to pick.
So it's like when you use that Google Images trick where you like Google image search one thing and then you look at the visually similar images and you go to that and then you just keep doing it until you find what you want.
Yeah,
pretty
generative design. It's a brand new thing. It's the AI
that's an
in
AI
CAD.
thing too.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, all the Google image stuff is
thing.
AI driven also. It's the exact same thing.
Wild.
Yeah.
How many bicycles are in these pictures?
That's the other thing. We are training. Every time you log into a website, we are training the internet.
Look, a little story here to wrap up this podcast.
Okay, this will be the last thing.
All right. So I get hit with one of those CAPTCHA things, right? Identify the parking meters. So somebody took a bunch of pictures in this neighborhood that had mailboxes that kind of looked like parking meters, but they're clearly mailboxes. Well, apparently most of the people aren't spending any time looking at the pictures because it wouldn't let me continue until I clicked on a dang mailbox to tell it that it was a parking meter.
Really?
I was like, that's not a parking meter. It's like, you need to click on it, otherwise you're not a human. It's like, man, you've had a lot of people who are lazy just click on your captures. You're like, this is not a parking meter. Like, so
oh my goodness.
Just like, wow. I had to betray the AI and be like, that's a mailbox. So if some
you
point
pull
in the
up
future,
in 2050 to a parking spot in front of a mailbox, they're like, please pay for your parking.
that's exactly what's gonna happen. Or honestly, I mean, that's probably the stuff like when you drive the Tesla and like the Tesla sees things with its AI. I mean, that's probably like one of the sources they pull their data from.
Yeah.
So yeah, same thing. Yeah.
Wild.
You'll see a little parking meter icon pop up when you're next to a mailbox.
Yeah, that's where human judgment will still be a pretty strong force for the foreseeable future, even in spite of all the AI advancements. It's like, at the end of the day, an AI can be incredibly well trained and incredibly capable, but it still will not have a broad macro sense of judgment.
Yeah.
As far as we know.
For a while. Yeah. It'll eventually get there. But that's general AI, and now we're talking like friggin' what's the the ultimatum thing.
The singularity.
Singularity. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a podcast for another time.
Until then, enjoy the Luke Skywalker deepfake when it comes out on Sunday.
I'm so excited for this. Oh my god, this is this is a big deal.
It's gonna be a fun one.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks
you.
for listening on all of your different platforms of choice.
If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing. It's also pretty much everywhere that you can listen to podcasts, Spotify, etc. You know, go check it out.
Follow Corridor Digital on Etsy.
But
now we have to make an Etsy account for Corridor.
No.
Because otherwise someone else is going to make it.
You know, on network television, if they said a website name and the website didn't exist, they had
They had to make it.
Make it, yeah.
Whoa.
You couldn't just say a website without the website being yours or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a weird rule, but kind of makes sense.
Huh.
Anyway, all right, thanks for watching. And see you
Bye.
next week.
Hopefully see you guys in another podcast soon.
Bye.